Oh yeah. So
It's a
hey,
good point.
we're gonna start
Good
our
point to
podcast now. So welcome back to When Bad Things Happen to Good People, the podcast about censorship and the arts. My name is Todd Sullivan. Joining me again is Peter Ammon. And today we're wrapping up our look at. I didn't let you say hi.
Why, hello, everyone. Yes,
And
that's filling me with rage.
and today we're gonna wrap up our look at Rage by Stephen King. And buttons are getting in my way. Sometimes it's fun to chat over it, especially live. You can just hear it fading out.
You know, I hate to go back to old technologies after that spiel, but my wife and I were talking about this the other day about recording songs off the radio way back in the day. Speaking of cassette tapes,
Yeah.
and the response from radio stations was to start talking over the start and ending of songs. Right? They'd have the disc jockeys.
Really?
Yeah. So this became a phenomenon, right, when blank cassettes that you could record
Yeah.
onto hit the market. And so the radio stations knew that kids like, me and my wife and whoever else had our little blasters and, listening at night and trying to record our favorite songs, right, and onto a cassette tape. So that's what they started doing, is they would start to have these kind of intros where they talk over the start of the song, or if the song had a long outro, they just kind of converse over the
Yeah.
whole thing so that you wouldn't be able to get the song
And
clean
because if
for
you
your
have it
mixtape.
recorded on tape, the only way you can listen is to tune into the radio,
That's
which is
right,
what they
yeah.
want. That's
Yeah.
really smart.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird time, but
Yeah. I remember like most recording I think I was doing like during in the annual or the weekly like top 10 countdown.
Mhm.
And there usually wasn't a lot of talking on those for whatever reason. But it would be like each week you'd have no idea
What you were
whether
gonna
your
get,
song was
yeah,
going to be
yeah.
in the top 10 that you wanted to record, or and if it was, what number it would be at. So you're like, every time the song's about to start,
Yeah, is it this? You had to know the first few
yeah.
notes of,
And if you didn't want to lose any of it,
yeah.
you had to like start and then find out and be like, no, and then
Yeah,
rewind it.
rewind it a bit.
Otherwise, you're going to miss the first couple of seconds, and
That's
that's
right,
no
yeah,
good in a
yeah.
mixtape. Hey, welcome back.
We are gonna be talking about books today.
We are going to be talking about books. I did want to say that when I was last time we were recorded, as we were wrapping up, and you were doing your farewell, I realized I think I've been introducing you with the wrong pronunciation of your name since we started. So sorry.
That's all right. It was pretty close. It
Yeah,
wasn't
but
like it was that far off.
it
But
really bugs me because
it's a
I took
weird
the
one.
time to say, like, how do you pronounce this properly before we did the first episode? And then I think I did it right for the first one. And then after that,
that's just like an accent. It comes and goes.
I
But
guess.
yeah, no,
I guess.
Ammon is how it's pronounced.
Ammon. But I've been doing almond.
Yeah. Now, I mean, it depends on the part of the world, because there are other people, in Canada that have that last name, and I think they pronounce it a little bit differently, right? But for us, for our family, it's always been Ammon.
Ammon. It just, I guess, in my mind, it's that sitting right in the middle between, because my first thing is like amen, right?
Yes.
Amen or amen.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's, my brain refuses to go to what it actually is, which is in the middle of that.
Yeah. Just keep it chill. And
Peter,
Peter
Ammon. Amen. 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 That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Amen.
There you go. Now you got it.
Amen. Yeah. All right.
Well, it's been good. I know you did so many episodes, with Oren there, and I'm glad I got the chance to come hang out with you and talk about band media.
Yeah, it's great. I'm super glad to have you, and
I've been liking it, man.
I look forward to mispronouncing your name in wonderful and strange
many
ways.
Many more
times. So let's talk about this band book. We're talking about Rage, which is an early novel by Stephen King, that was originally published under the name Richard Bachman. King started publishing under a pen name because he was. My voice is getting to be distracting in my ear. He was publishing. Basically, he was creating and writing too many books to publish. His publishers couldn't keep up.
Yeah. Real first world problems.
Real first world problems. Yeah, real celebrity superstar writer problems. And he decided to start publishing under a pen name, taking these maybe lesser, these are earlier books that were sort of rejected by publishers originally, that now that he's Stephen King, he can kind of like coerce them into taking a chance on
That's right. Yeah.
and putting them out under a pen name. He published 5. Rage was the first of the 5, before he was found out and outed. And he's published, as far as I know, 2 since then.
Oh, really?
So 2 more books under the name Richard Bachman, even though everybody knows
Right.
it's Richard Bachman. One of them was a book called Blaze, which he used the pen name for in part because it was another novel he had originally written very early on in his life.
Okay.
And so it sort of felt like it fit within that.
It was part of that group
Yeah.
of work. Yeah. Okay.
And the other was sort of kind of almost a publishing gimmick. He published 2 books simultaneously. One was called The Regulators, and one was called Desperation.
Okay.
One by Stephen King, one by Richard Bachman. 2 completely different stories.
Same characters or
Same character
names?
names.
Okay. Neat.
Sometimes like their characteristics would be the same, but I think quite often the personalities were different. So someone who
Okay.
was a villain in one book would be a good guy in a different book.
Okay.
But it's kind of like these 2 kind of simultaneous stories taking place in 2 very alternate universes. And it seems like that.
So are you saying that Stephen King invented the media multiverse? question.
Well, I guess we'd have to
That's
probably
kinda interesting.
if we're looking at all media, I think probably I would bet on DC Comics having maybe the first reference to a multiverse,
Okay.
just because they go back so far. But I mean, yeah, King has been
That's
connecting
more the
his stories
literary
and books
multiverse,
together
yeah.
for a long time. And then his Dark Tower series was really all about all of the connections,
Okay,
everything woven
okay.
together. To my knowledge, though, Rage is not a part of that Stephen
Not a part
King
of that universe?
but maybe somebody.
But the squirrel in Rage is. No.
The squirrel in Rage is, yes. He's managed to somehow slip between the universes, but not the lawn that just comes up and says
Says how do you
howdy.
do? Or
Yeah, I think it just says howdy. So Rage has been pulled from publication by Stephen King. That's why we're talking about it. It's been connected to multiple school shootings, one in particular, which I don't have in front of me right now.
But there were 3 fatalities.
Yeah,
which was, I think, a first for some of the earlier linked ones. Yeah.
And King's attitude basically like, well, if this is even remotely possibly leading people to shoot people, then fuck it, I'll just take it off the shelf.
Yeah. Which I think we described earlier was kind of the one reasonable kind of work of censorship, is if you censor yourself because you don't like or you don't think that the world will still appreciate the message or be able to understand your work the way it was intended any longer, right? So
yeah,
really, we're kind of anti-censorship here. So to kind of say that there is one little niche that is acceptable is kind of a big
no,
thing,
but I do, there'll be plenty of people who kind of disagree with that as well, because there's people who, for example, this is less about censorship and more about like Final Cut. But if you look at something like Star Wars, where George Lucas was fiddling with it literally up until he sold it to Disney, like when Episode 4, A New Hope, aired on Disney Plus. There was a new line in it that people had never seen before.
Oh, really?
It's
There's some retconning.
Yeah. Greedo shouts McClunky when he dies. Nobody knows what that word means for sure. Nobody knew it happened.
They're setting something up for like years.
It was so weird because it's like it's like nobody knew it was coming. Disney didn't know it was coming. It was just like George was just fucking around with his movie and then probably did it like 10 years ago. Forgot about it. Didn't tell anybody. But it's like he has made so many changes to those movies over the years, and it's impossible to legally acquire sort of the way it looked originally.
Oh.
And there's lots of people who saw it the way it looked originally who are not fans of like the special editions and all the additional CGI that wish they could have that. And I understand that perspective. But this is also that same kind of case where this is what the artist wants. It's how he wants his work represented.
Yep.
And as much as it's frustrating, as much as I wish it was easier to go out and find a copy of Rage for myself to read, it's what the artist has chosen to do, and you kind of have to respect it, even if you don't agree with it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, if looking at Star Wars, and this could be a controversial line as a kind of a masterpiece or a magnum opus, right? If that's never quite finished, if there's always tweaks and things that you want to make and are able to, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Right.
And one of my thoughts on Rage. Speaking of the Blaze book that King wrote as something that he had sort of started writing earlier in his career, that he came back to later in his career and finished up. I wonder what Rage could have looked like if that had been what happened to that book. Like, it never got published as Richard Bachman, and it just stayed as something in his shelf for years and years and years and years, until maybe 20, 30, 40 years later, he's found a way to go back to that story and do it in a different way that's maybe less triggering violence or whatever. And that's sort of what I found myself wondering about as I was reading it and after I had read it, because I still think it's a really good book, really interesting message at its heart. It's just because of that, it's too bad it wasn't done in a way that didn't lead to it no longer being in publication.
Yeah, well, I think part of the message, because it really does target that focal point of a teenager's life, navigating high school and thinking about how they want to be perceived in the world and how it matters or doesn't matter. That's a very interesting message, and the audience being kind of high schoolers and maybe wanting to hear or needing that message, uh that you know the violence aspect of it really kind of precludes it from sticking around to try and reach that audience, right? Because if there is, as we've seen, some handful of incidents that happen because of this, then it's tough to justify continuing to try and push that towards that group of teenagers, right? No matter how good the message is, or the potent thoughts that these students should be thinking about. So yeah, I mean, I can see why you'd want to take it out.
Yeah, and so I guess we both agree that it. We have a question here from Angeli.
Okay, we got a question from Angeli.
Do you think that Joe McKennedy is real or simply a figment of Charlie's imagination? Holy crap, that's a great question, because that.
Did you have a thought like that when you were reading the book?
I didn't, and I think that's. Wow, I wish somebody had asked me that before I read it, so I could.
But like before you read the whole book?
Well, yeah, before I reread it, because I've read it multiple times before this, because as I said, I really loved it in high school. But I would love a reapproach with that thought in mind, because that's really interesting. My gut feeling is to say I think he's real, just because he has that letter that's been written at the end.
Well, that for me, because I had some thoughts on this, that like a bit of a what if there is no Joe McKennedy, like it's just imaginary friend that Charlie has. And part of what kind of hit it for me was that letter at the end. It's very positive. I know we have it's redacted, so people at the institution are definitely checking his mail, kind of, that's part of the aspect. But I think you can also look at it as, Charlie's, if he's really in a mental institution, or really kind of gone off the deep end, and not to say that he really has, but he has some problems. But in that mental institution, if he kind of had this imaginary friend, or this figment of his imagination spurring him on, or telling him that he's okay, or in his loneliest moments being a friend that he can turn to, all of a sudden this letter shows up, and it's telling him how much of an impact he's had on the kids in the room, and that their lives have gone on to interesting and diverse things. It's very strange to me that letter came from Joe McKennedy. He wasn't in the class, right? He wasn't part of the group, and suddenly he's the spokesperson for everyone there, and they kind of all told Joe to give their love and support to Charlie. I'm not saying that he isn't real. I'm just saying there's a way to look at all the interactions that he's had with Joe as potentially him not really existing.
Where would you say the letter came from then, if it wasn't Joe?
It's also part of Charlie's imagination.
And see,
right?
and that's where
it's something that he made up to buoy himself up.
Right.
In
but
his
here's the issue that I have as far as the way the book is presented goes. Because I mean, I guess you could argue that the court document that explains what Charlie was charged with, and the medical document about Ted Jones, that those are also part of his imagination?
No.
But
I,
here's the thing: like, if those documents are real,
Mhm.
Charlie would not have.
No.
Which means that if we acknowledge that the documents in the book are real, regardless of whether Charlie has them,
Regardless of the
that means
origin.
the
Yeah.
letter can't be only a figment of his imagination. It has to be a physical object.
I get the logic on that, but I think there's a way around it, right? Because these documents that we're looking at, we can only assume are, because he says at one point in the book that he hasn't talked about it or written about it since now, right? So it gives the impression that he's kind of maybe writing something,
Yes,
right?
because that was my thought.
Yeah.
Is that
And
the book
and
is
that
his
somebody
sort
has
of
put it together
yeah
later and then added some documentation. So if you're looking at it that way, then it's like, yeah, all of those things have to be real. But if we look at it in the context of, well, this is still just how he's imagining telling this story, that the letter could potentially be just a figment of his
yeah.
imagination, right? I mean, I'm not saying that Joe
No,
doesn't
it's
exist,
certainly
but
interesting to think about.
I think there's
And
an argument where you could read it in that light and go, yeah,
yeah,
like he
yeah.
could just be a figment of
It's
Charlie's
I think the
imagination.
argument would be much more compelling if there wasn't that letter. And I don't
It's
think
the physical documentation
it's
that
the
holds up
physical
the case.
documentation always, yeah. But like I don't think that it needs to be in his imagination to justify why the letter came from Joe. Joe is basically Charlie's only friend.
Mhm.
Even though that the people in the classroom that day went through things with him and were moved by him, I don't know how many of them would have been compelled to write. Doesn't and the fact that we don't see those letters in there doesn't necessarily mean that none of them did write him
That's
either.
right.
That
Yeah.
could have just been chosen. It just makes sense to me that Joe would be the one to say,
To take it
"Hey,
upon himself to
I love you,
contact
man.
people and
I still want to
see
come
what,
see
yeah,
you if they finally
yeah,
let you have visitors." And I don't know that anyone really went out of their way to ask him to tell Charlie things. It's probably
right,
just stuff that comes up in conversation.
right.
Joe
He's
is
kept his ear
probably
to the ground
and he
and just
probably
wants to,
also like
yeah,
he was running within social circles that Charlie was close to, which means he probably knows a lot of those people. I think he was like a grade or two ahead of Charlie, and that's why he wouldn't have been in the
mm,
classroom. But it doesn't mean he didn't have any sort of social interaction with those other kids, right?
right, yeah,
I just think that yeah, it's just he's the most likely one to actually reach out and care about Charlie,
right.
right?
Or the only one. I mean,
Or the only one.
he's not hearing from his parents. Presumably, his dad is, maybe his mom, but she seemed quite
Oh,
upset, right?
yeah.
So
Well, I
yeah,
mean, and yeah, she was in she was in deep into like drug and alcohol stupor when after
yeah,
the math teacher, like,
yeah. So probably not hearing from his parents.
no, I wouldn't think so.
Presumably, the only contact he has is with doctors. So yeah, a letter from Joe would mean a lot, and maybe Joe would know that.
Hmm.
But on the flip side, it could still be
Could
just
still be
his imagination that he's
he
getting
could have written the
any
letter
letters at
to
all,
himself and then
right?
like
Yeah.
sent it to himself through the mail.
Well,
And
if he's really that potentially lonely and cut off from any contact, right? He could have made it up potentially,
yeah,
right?
for sure,
Who
for sure.
knows?
It's definitely an interesting idea worth thinking about. In the
Yeah.
same way that there's this other theory that have you seen the Big Lebowski?
Long
There's-
time ago, yeah.
yeah, there's a theory that Donnie, Steve Buscemi's character, isn't real
Isn't real, yeah. It doesn't exist.
because um, the dude Lebowski has almost little to no interaction with him, and so it's the idea is that he is someone that died when in the war with John
Right.
Goodman's character.
He's in the coffee can, like that's the where the theory goes.
Well, maybe he's always been in a coffee
He's
can,
always been
right?
in
And
a
he's
coffee
never
can,
really
yeah.
processed the death, and so he
Hmm.
sees him and he hears him, and he's dealing with that. And then that's anyway. It's likely not true, but it's a fun
Yeah,
theory.
yeah. Again,
Um,
same I think with this, where it's likely not true. I would imagine that I think you're right about how the book was written and put together, Todd. That it's not really written to give you any real sense that Joe is an imaginary figure. But I think it's an interesting thought exercise to go, yeah, what if he was that over the edge, or he had other mental issues on the go, including this kind of multiple personality, or figment of your imagination type characters that were maybe spurring him on, or giving him another outlet to think like, yeah, I've got a friend who maybe approves of how I do things or whatever, and that maybe is what led him to take the actions that he did. But yeah, definitely not really the way you pick it up from the book, at least not on the first read.
No, but it
interesting
is.
thought.
I think it is definitely an idea worth considering, because we do know that Charlie is at least a certain amount crazy.
Yes.
And so how much crazier could it be?
Yeah.
And that would be, it's an interesting thought.
Mm-hmm. And Ted Jones is way beyond that.
Yeah, Ted Jones is in
Poor
a whole
Ted Jones.
other. Yeah, let's talk about Ted for a second.
Yeah.
How do we feel about what happened to him?
I mean, yeah, he wasn't a good dude, but it wasn't like he was a terrible person, really. You know, he was confused. You know, was dealing with a lot of stuff in his life. You know, not to say that he had a really, really bad life or anything like that, but he was dealing with stuff. He wasn't into, the group think that the class had when everyone got on board with what Charlie was doing. And he spoke up against it. He was the only one, right? And maybe if the things had been different, if it wasn't Charlie, maybe he would have been right there with everyone else, right? But he had that personal kind of dislike of Charlie,
right,
of what Charlie represented, and he just couldn't get there, right? And the class went through something powerful in the end, right? They were it was kind of this real open, vulnerable kind of discussion about life. And for all intents and purposes, Ted, aside from trying to take Charlie down, he wasn't really that against what was going on, aside from a few times when he spoke up when Sandra was talking about him.
Yeah, I mean, when he was directly involved, he cared.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that.
So I just feel like the class was pretty harsh on him at the end. I mean, they really took it to. I mean, the guy's catatonic for the rest of his life. Like, that's pretty harsh kind of treatment.
I mean,
because he didn't want to participate.
We don't know that for sure.
You think the electroshock treatment works, and he snaps out of it?
He's young. Like, he's got plenty of years ahead of him, assuming that he takes care of himself to some degree.
But
and
the
like
inky hands,
I just mean he's got plenty of time to snap out of it at some point. I don't know.
Well, let's hope.
Maybe
so.
There'll be some, 20 years, 30 years into the future, there'll be some like breakthrough in brain therapy that he can take advantage of.
Is there a Ted Jones in any other Stephen King novels where he's a messed up older adult who's reeling from the past or something?
I don't know. I've never thought about that. Yeah, there certainly could be.
Speaking of the Stephen King,
I was going to say
metaverse.
There's probably been characters who are Ted Jones-esque, characters who behave the same way. But I think in future books, King's bad guys tend to be a lot more objectively bad.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just sort of morally
teenage
ambiguous
feud with some angst.
Yeah, right. Like, because all things considered, Ted just didn't feel like sharing in the share circle.
Yeah,
I don't know that he deserved what he got, but at the same time, like as a metaphor for that kind of a student, it does feel like how else could it have ended, right?
Yeah, I get that, right? And especially considering the extent of the experience they went through together, right? For him to not want to share, I can see how that would be quite unnerving to the class, of going like, what is he going to say about this this time that's going to be different from our stories? Why didn't he want to share with us? How come he's being hidden, right? Why is he still closeted, or he's not revealing his true self the way the rest of us did? And that's either an affront or something that they just can't have out there when they in the real world, right? So there's multiple kind of places of fear and mistrust that I think would push this group to lash out like that for sure.
Join the conversation. You want to chat with us about Rage, chat with us about your thoughts on what we've talked about so far? Please give us a call if you're using the Podbean app with a set of headphones, either wirelessly connected or plugged in. Give us a call and we'd love to chat with you.
Yeah. I know maybe not everyone's read the book, but hopefully the last couple episodes you've got a chance to kind of hear what it's about and maybe form some thoughts as to the importance of the work versus the depublication, or whether Joe McKennedy's real or not, some of that kind of stuff, and we can discuss it a little bit more, because I haven't read many Stephen King books, and I certainly haven't read one for a while, and this just reminded me of what a good writer is,
Mhm, mhm.
and especially considering how early of work it
Yeah,
was for
that's
him.
what really astounded
Yeah,
me is like again, it's been so long since I read this. So yeah, being able to see just how well written it
yeah.
is just it's a page turner.
It is. It really is, and it's got a real quick pace to it.
Yeah,
Obviously, our 37 or 38 chapters are done in the space of 3 or 4 hours in real world time,
yeah,
and it's got that lightning pace, but it also makes time for, I think we talked about this in one of the other episodes, these tangents, these kind of callback moments where he delves into the past or some experience that he's had, and he starts thinking about it, and then it comes back around and ties in kind of perfectly with what's happening, or
yeah,
the kind of
yeah.
the action or thoughts that are on the go at the time. And that was really neat, just how well that flowed together, but also still gave you that hint of, yeah, Charlie is a little crazy, just with how his thoughts are jumping around, and that kind of thing, right? It is really, really well put together in
Yeah.
that sense, and really fleshed out that character, which is what I think that type of book needs, right? Is you really need to
Well, I
be in
think
that character's head.
as a writer, that is definitely one of King's strongest abilities is his ability to write characters that are three dimensional and interesting, uh, and you care about them,
Hmm.
because that's absolutely instrumental, I think, especially in horror fiction, because if you don't care about the fates of the people you're reading about, you're not going to care about the story.
That's right. Well, and things that happen to him are less of a concern,
Yeah,
less
exactly.
frightening, or less, dramatic or thrilling.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
And not to
sure.
say that you can't have a different kind of horror story that's got unlikable characters in it. But I think for your traditional for all novels really, but especially for horror, you need to really understand the characters and feel for them and care about them.
That's
And
right.
that is something that King again was clearly good at
From a
very
very,
early
yeah, from
on.
very young.
And juggling multiple characters too. That's something else he's very well known for, is having these big epic stories with like hundreds of characters.
Is
I,
that like the Dark Tower and the
yeah, but
the
also things
Stand and
like Under the Dome, for example, which is this, it's about 1,000 pages, and it's about this little small town that ends up trapped under a dome.
okay, yeah,
But like literally, there's probably more than 100 characters in the book
that
that are
each have their own
named.
development and
They don't necessarily have their own development. They might appear on a single page,
hmm,
but like there's not a single character in a King book that doesn't get a name or a little bit of backstory.
yeah,
Like
okay.
he may be there for a page, but you're going to know why he's walking down that street in that moment, what he thinks about his wife, and what part of his body is itchy. You're going to find out shit about this
It's
character,
pretty specific.
right? Well, I mean, maybe not those specific things, but like there's
Yeah,
going to be some sort of a
yeah,
monologue going on in the character's mind that he's going to tell you about, that tells you something about that character,
right.
even if it's only for a page. Like it's insane. I don't know how the man does
Wow. Well, this turned into a real Stephen King love fest.
it.
I
I
mean,
mean,
it was a great book.
yeah.
Obviously the subject matter, and the effect that it, had on youths in that era was not ideal. And so, I guess, from my standpoint, I kind of agree with the depublication if that's what he felt was necessary. But man, great book. And if you can handle it without maybe thinking that you might go a little gung-ho on your school, it's a book worth reading. I mean, it's really a really interesting look at the kind of teenage experience, and a little bit of that social structure of high school, and how people hide their true selves from each other, and that kind of thing. And when it really kind of all comes out, like, everybody has similar problems, or could potentially relate to other people's problems, right? So yeah, that I think is one reason to still kind of look at this book, or try and get a hold of it if you want to kind of go through that, because it's really well written,
Yeah.
and yeah, has some interesting, even if they're a little outdated potentially with some of the language,
Well, that's part of the fun of it, I
yeah,
think, is encountering some of this,
so
slicker than owl shits
slicker than
and
owl shit,
happy
that's,
horse shits
yeah,
and yeah.
yeah. So I think it's still worthwhile, as far as if you
Oh,
have
I
a
do
chance
too.
to
And
read it. And
the rest of the books in the Bachman collection are also really, really good. Some of them better than this, actually, in my opinion. So it's not like you'd be going out and getting spending money to get a single book that you're only going to read a tiny portion
Yeah,
of.
you're not buying the album for the single here.
No, everything else is really, really worth reading. It's hard to find.
Yeah, I mean, I know we talked about. I ordered the one off Amazon that
Yeah.
said "with rage" in the title, and then after I ordered it, and it showed up, and I kind of went back and looked at there were comments below that said, "Nope, doesn't include rage." So the omnibus really only has 4 books, not 5.
3, not 4.
3, not 4. Yeah. So
yeah,
good value for the money.
Yeah. And what was I going to say? Sorry, I just had a mess up my screen. I forgot. What were you just saying? Shit.
Just talking about the value of the other books that
right.
that
So
are
yeah,
part
you're
of-
gonna
part
have
of
to
the
you're gonna have to
Richard
look
Bachman.
to eBay or like local used bookstores if you want to find this, because and probably your local used bookstores are the better bet, because eBay, these people know that it's hard to get a hold of, and you're going to see cranked up
Yeah,
prices from people just trying to profit. And I mean, I guess I don't want to say they're profiteering. It is technically a legitimately rare book at this point.
Yeah.
Especially if you're looking for like some of the early ones, like I lucked into finding the original hardcover. But I also got it, for like $3 or whatever. So like that's a win.
Yeah, so if you can find it somewhere, read it.
Yep.
If you haven't.
And if you do, come listen to the podcast again.
Yeah, go through these again and think about the question that you would have asked if you called in at the time.
Yeah. And then call into a future episode and harass us about a different
right,
book
yeah.
when we're talking about something
Who knows what we'll be talking
unrelated.
about. Yeah.
If I don't know if I'm sure there's other Stephen King books that have been
banned.
Yeah, pulled from schools at least.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll have to check that out for one of our next ones.
Maybe.
Because I wouldn't mind reading another Stephen King book. I really thought, if this is his kind of early state, I mean, man, this is anything's going to be good. And I know I've read a couple of other books, and they've been really well put together as well. So yeah, I'd do another one for sure.
All right, well, you heard it here first. maybe we'll do another Stephen King book.
Possibly
confirmed.
In the future, there is a chance. 100% confirmed that there is a probability.
Things could happen. We don't know. Yeah. All right. Well,
should we talk about our next pick, or are we solid on it, or?
As far, I think we're solid on the next pick. I just want to make sure we're sort of done with Rage. There's nothing else to really go over. Nothing. No final thoughts.
Well, I think in the past we've kind of rehashed our rating system.
Yeah, we both basically gave it a 4 last time, which is it's considerably high.
Yeah, I don't really like to give out 5s. That's I'm pretty reserved with that. Someone's got to really knock your socks off to get a 5, I think. Yeah. But that being said, I mean, after kind of going back through this and ruminating on kind of, because when you do it in chunks, right, 100 pages at a time, or 50 ebook pages or whatever it was, like you kind of it's broken up, and it's not until you maybe take.
You're not necessarily thinking about the whole.
Yeah, you're kind of thinking about this chunk that I need to dissect and figure out kind of what's going on, right? So, after kind of going back through and taking a look at what the story is trying to tell us as far as the problems or non-problems or the things that teenagers keep hidden, and how they sequester themselves in these neat little lives from each other, and nobody ever really knows their true selves, that kind of thing. Granted, is a lot more present in media these days, those kind of stories, but at the time, I mean, I think there wasn't a lot of that, that kind of in-depth view into the teenage mind. And so I think there, as we've said a few times now, there's some real value in that story. Yes, it's clouded with kind of the violence aspect and the school kind of shooting, but kind of taking that out of play in terms of, that was maybe the necessary kind of inciting thing to get that discussion flowing. It is at the heart, I think, still that book about being a teenager. Right.
Yeah.
Whether it's going crazy or just hiding a little bit of your life from somebody, like what is that like? And yeah, I think it's really valuable. And I think for that reason, I think I might go as high as like a 4.5. like just kind
Wow.
of going up like 4.5 stars, like getting real close to where I'm comfortable with, and going, yeah, I think this, deserves to be a little more recommended.
Interesting. Wow. I'm going to
You
stick with
heard
the
it here
4.
first.
I'm going to stick with the 4. And it's because I think I still have this part of my mind that is fascinated with the concept of what could this book have been if it had ruminated in the back of King's mind for longer. Is there some alternate future version where he manages to reapproach this book in a way where it can be published with the same kind of message, but not with a storyline that requires it be pulled from schools or pulled from publication? And that's the only reason that I'm sticking it for, because I do think it's still a great book. I just feel like it it could have been more somehow. Maybe it's impossible.
I think there was a lot of meat there that could have continued to be expanded upon. Definitely, there were other students in the classroom that didn't get, their chapter or their story or whatever. But I think we're made to understand that there was that discussion going on, right? So I think there's more meat there to be
A sequel to this
explored.
would be wild. Like not necessarily a sequel, maybe, but like each character from the classroom gets like one chapter to find out
Yeah.
who they are 20, 30 years later.
Like a Zack Snyder edit.
Yeah,
where
right?
It's just 2 hours longer. And we get to see every little intricate character
But no, I think,
development.
and maybe it's mostly because of that letter where things are redacted, but like I think maybe more than any other maybe book in general that I've read, I really wonder what happened to these characters later.
Yeah,
right?
For sure. I mean, being such a traumatic yet also cathartic and empowering experience.
Yeah.
And that letter does express there's been some serious changes in these people's lives, and leads to some interesting questions of like, wait, what did happen with those two, or who did she marry, and like what's going on,
what did Pigpen get up to, and what?
So I mean, both a sequel and an expansion would be kind of interesting to see,
or even just an extra chapter at the end that does like the whole like closing credits of the movie where it tells you like what each character went on to do with the rest of their lives. Pigpen eventually took a shower in 1970.
Right. Ted Jones eventually recovered and became a villain in another book.
Yes, he was called the Inky Black Man.
But yeah, so I mean, I granted you're stuck on the 4. I think that's still quite the high rating, right, when it comes to any book. Really that's kind of into the must read category, I think, a 4 out of 5. So just a really interesting book, and I think I don't have too many more thoughts to go through. I increased my rating once again.
Yeah,
I'm not good at holding firm on my first ratings.
That's fine. I mean, we want to hear what your actual final thought is on things. And I'm really, I think it's wild that you've given it an extra half a star, because I agree that it's a really great book, and I just feel like maybe not a whole lot of it have necessarily agreed with me. So
right on.
So yeah, let's talk about where we're going next.
Yeah.
When we were talking about privately between ourselves what we were going to do next, it was important to me right now to try to jump on something that's a little bit topical. And so there's been some pretty sweeping book bannings in schools in Florida.
Yep. As well as some other states as well.
As some other states. Florida. Florida's particularly been on the news because of
it was a new law, right?
It's a new law, and it's just Governor DeSantis there in general has been doing a lot of very sort of archaic, very conservative movements and things that are people are getting concerned. People are leaving Florida. People are, And so, I wanted to look at those. And also, I was hoping to cover something that would fit within Pride Month.
Yeah.
Which is what we're sitting in right now. And we ended up...
We'll have to somehow record this before the end of June.
Well, as long as, in my opinion, as long as we read it in June, that's what really matters. Yeah. But you're right. We should try. We should definitely make the effort. And also, because I learned about this book from my kid.
Yeah, me too, actually.
We're going to be covering the graphic novel Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, which is included in the bans in Florida. This book of hers and I can't think of what the other one is. She's got a novel that was also pulled from Florida, and yeah, apparently it's kind of a story of like queer romance in high school.
Yes,
as I understand it.
in England.
Oh, is it in England?
Well, I think so.
Know
I-
that.
my daughter has read, I think, all the ones that are available in Canada at the time. So I'm pretty sure they're British.
That does make sense because
Yeah.
I just bought my kid the second volume of this, and I browsed through like the first 10 or 15 pages of it out of curiosity, and I do vaguely remember there being some sort of it was a jumper
Oh,
for a
okay.
sweater.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, that's interesting. That's British.
When they tucked in and
No, it was just the
quintessential
jumper.
British stuff.
It was just the jumper.
Just
The
the
jumper
jumper,
was,
right.
but that's such a like. How did that get that name?
Yeah,
You have to jump to like put. It's such a weird
don't
name for
know.
a sweater. Hello, Mr. Up, and also we have Man Cave Sound, or we did have Mr. Man Cave Sound. Man Cave Sound seems to have left. We're just wrapping up our look at Rage by Stephen King. Give us a call if you want. We're probably shutting it down here pretty quick. But
Yeah, any questions you still have,
if
or
you wanted
stuff
to call and just chat with us about
Yeah.
banned books, or
I'm sure we missed plenty of things that were up for discussion as part of
Yeah.
that book. Or if you have any thoughts on our new venture of reading Heartstopper,
Yep.
Yeah, let us know.
if you want to talk about Stephen King in general, you want to talk about what were we talking about like earlier? Oh,
Old technology. Yeah, if you have some thoughts on old technology,
share your best memory of using a rotary dial phone.
Yeah, I got a Laserdisc player.
I always loved Laserdisc.
I thought Laserdisc was a neat idea.
I never had one, but I just like it was what like all of the real cinephiles talked about having. Like,
yeah, that's right. It was at the time. It was the superior technology.
It was, yeah.
Or the machine that was like had the laser disc, but then also you could put 5 like DVDs in. And
that's
it was like an either or.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, those were quite the machines.
I'm sure that there's
young kids have no idea what we're talking about.
They have no idea. There was understanding of like the format wars of
Yeah.
like Betamax
Beta,
versus
yeah.
VHS, and then again with Blu-ray
and
versus like
DVD.
HD DVD.
Yeah.
God damn it! And HD DVD was like one of the few technologies where
8-track and cassette tapes.
Oh, that's another one, right?
Like
Yeah.
all sorts of.
I just remember that HD DVD was one of the things like normally when it comes to a shifting technology, it's safe to support the one that porn supports, right?
That's the usual.
That's just generally the rule.
It's kind of a rule of thumb for life.
It is, yeah. Like porn helped revolutionize like streaming video on the internet. They helped revolutionize commerce on the internet. Like porn is at
They
the
invented
forefront,
paywalls,
pretty
right?
much.
Yeah.
But porn did embrace HD DVD over Blu-ray, and they lost. So
I think that's the one exception that proves the rule is
Maybe.
true, or
maybe
something like that.
Yeah, I don't understand that phrase, the exception that proves the rule, because
Yeah.
if it's a rule,
Why is there
an exception
Yeah.
should negate the fact that it's
That's
a
right.
rule.
It is
but-
not a hard and fast rule if there's exceptions.
Yeah. Glenn B's here now. Hey, Glenn B. Oh, we just lost Mister. Master of Puckery. That's a fun reference. Hey, Glenn B. We're talking about Rage by Stephen King, and maybe wrapping it up. But if you want to call in and share your thoughts about Rage, hockey related, that's fun. We're not talking about hockey, but Master of Puckery. That's
Yes.
that's the hockey related thing. I get it. Was there a sports reference in Rage? They did play Follow the Leader.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to, we're just maybe, I don't know the book. Yeah. Do you know Stephen King? This will be a fun conversation. We'll say something and wait a second for him to type.
This is all up to your typing speed.
Yeah, how fast do you type there, Glenn? Cool. Do you want to talk about Stephen King? You want to talk about banned books? You can call us if you want. Otherwise, we're probably going to drift off the air here pretty quick. Letting it go silent for a second.
Yeah, nothing like dead air to spur on
Yeah,
people
all the
listening to
best
wanting to call in.
podcasts have some random dead air in the middle
yeah.
of them. Just move one more message there. I can call if you want to go. It's okay too. I appreciate I
we've
appreciate
got
your
time. We've got
understanding,
time, Glenn. Like
Yeah.
we can handle a call, especially if you have something to chat about in on Stephen King. You know, we've talked a bit about the Richard Bachman kind of times, and you know, I'm not as familiar a Stephen King reader as Todd, so maybe you can illuminate me as to some of the other things that he's done. Or you know, we did talk a little bit about kind of the Stephen King metaverse and how some of his characters are connected and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah.
if you have any thoughts on that or some cool examples to share, that'd be awesome.
You did ring there briefly, and then I didn't click accept fast enough, and it disappeared. So if you want to try that again, we would love to chat. And oh, there it is again. Let's try this. And we're going to invite. Oh man, it disappears too quick.
That was not a lot of time.
I
that
keep
it was up on
drinking
the screen.
every time that pops up, and then I have to put my drink down before I can click, and I can't click fast enough.
I think third time's a charm. If you want to try
invite from profile and see if that works. Well, I mean, I guess I can try that. If you insist, we'll try that.
So this is like,
hey,
don't call Glenn us, we'll call you.
Now, Master of Puckery, how's it going?
Hey, I'm good. How are you guys?
Lovely.
Yeah, we're a few drinks in. You know, we're talking about Rage. So how are you doing?
I'm not a few drinks in, but I'm a couple joints in, so I suppose we're probably close on the same level.
Similar spaces.
Yeah,
then,
I don't know a whole
same
lot
road.
about Stephen King. I just remember the one movie with that lady that like broke the actor's legs or whatever in the cabin.
Oh, Misery. Yeah.
That's really the only Stephen King I really know. Not a big thriller guy. Really, it's not
Sure.
my,
Okay,
it's not my style of book.
Yeah.
I'd get like too into it, and then my mind goes weird places.
Yeah, not everyone likes that. I got a friend who's like that. He does not like appreciate the dark books because he doesn't like where it takes his brain.
Yeah, which is perfectly fine, man. Like knowing that about yourself and being like, yeah, hey, I know this, and I'm not going to go down there. Like that's awesome, man. I wish I was that self-aware when I was like a kid. It takes a lot of time to develop.
Well, in my case, I'm 36, so it's not like it was instant. I didn't like crawl out of the womb going, "Hey guys, I'm a baby."
So you're saying you've had some experiences?
A couple,
right
a lot,
on,
just a couple. You know, one experience a year is good enough for me. I don't want to go too quick.
There you go. That's good. Yeah. And are you talking like pivotal experiences once per year? That's pretty good. That's not bad.
I mean, if I could keep it to less than that for pivotal experiences, but experiences in general.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
okay. Like whitewater rafting once per year. So like along those lines.
That's like my my producing children. That's like once a decade.
Once a decade. Well, yes. Hopefully there's some practice in between, but you know, that's not bad.
Oh, if I had like a baseball batting average on it, I'd be well below the Mendoza line, well below.
So what brings you to Podbean today?
Well, I used to be on Podbean all the time. Now I don't really go on Podbean at all. But then I was sitting outside smoking. I'm like, I should check out Podbean. I remember checking you guys out once before and thought you guys were pretty cool. I'm like, I should check those guys out again. And
yeah, we're still
welcome back.
Still talking about banned books and other media.
I think you guys were talking about a book that used to be in school, maybe of Mice and Men.
Yeah, we did cover of Mice and Men. Yep, that was a great one.
That was the book I was here for.
Excellent.
Right
yeah.
On.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on book bans and that sort of thing?
I think books should just be readily available. I mean, they put the parental advisory, explicit lyrics on a CD. Why can't you put like the same label on a book? That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know why.
That's a really good point. Like
explicit content. You know,
yeah.
Hey, we told you ahead of time. This book's gonna have a lot of talk of things that you might be uncomfortable with. Up to you.
They do that with like video games and you know, they've got the rating system on movies that tell you literally like it's got nudity, it's got swearing, it's got blood and gore. Like you're right. Why can't they do that for books?
Or is the thought that that's advertising somehow like, hey, check out all the cool stuff in this book that you're gonna want to, you know, read that your parents don't want to tell you.
Well, I mean, if it works
However,
for video
like
games.
if you want to get kids to start reading instead of playing video games, maybe they should start putting explicit content on books.
Right?
This book contains wording that suggests nudity.
Yeah, graphic depictions of sex. Doesn't have that Pokemon come here.
Well,
I mean, just like on the TV shows or whatever. I remember as a kid, like, you know, staying up too late watching TV, and about midnight comes on, and some movie I've never heard of comes on and it says this movie may contain sexuality and nudity. I'm like,
Yeah.
yes.
And you're like, great.
Yes.
Now I'm staying up for another couple hours.
I've lucked into it.
An hour and a half in, a man shows his butt, and I'm greatly disappointed.
Yeah, it's full frontal male nudity. You're like, God, wasted
All
hour and a
that
half.
time.
Could have been watching something much more productive.
Exactly. Or hopefully with better nudity.
Exactly.
Yeah, they don't ever say the quality of the
No,
nudity. That's not
No,
part of the
no.
rating system.
It needs to be like exciting nudity or disappointing
That's
nudity.
right.
Has to
Is
be
it good
included.
naked or bad naked? We need to know.
Nudity that is pleasing to the straight man's eye.
Exactly.
Great.
Who is the
Awesome,
nudity
man.
for?
Yeah, what's the target demographic of the nudity?
They should have
Good
that.
thought,
They
man.
should have that.
Yeah.
Target
agree.
demo for nudity in movies. They should do that.
Exactly.
They have a
Well,
target audience for
also
movie
the
itself
first
and
good
a target
idea, though,
audience for
about-
the nudity.
But I think your idea about the books and kind of getting that little disclaimer on it, that I think that's a pretty sensible idea. Right? I
don't
mean,
know.
I think
I
that
like
was
to
the
think-
genesis of putting CDs and other stuff.
Yeah.
Was to appease some of that right.
Yeah, the parental groups and everything else.
It
Yeah.
certainly didn't appease my parents, that's for sure.
No.
They did not want to know what was going on that I was purchasing in their company. They're like, explicit content, hard glare, still buying it.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh no, he said the word fuck. Oh well, who
Yeah.
cares?
I've heard it before, Mom and Dad. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched hockey with my dad. I heard many words that were very new to me at a very young age.
That's right. Yeah. My dad was the same way watching sports on TV. Like I think he felt like they could hear him. on the
Right,
other
yeah,
side,
yeah,
right? Like,
Oh, I swear my dad honestly thought he could hear him because if they couldn't hear him, certainly the neighborhood could.
What part of the world are you from, Glenn?
I'm in Saskatchewan, Canada.
Oh, hey.
right on.
We're
Couple
in-
provinces
You guys
over.
from Canada?
Yeah, we're in BC.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
I also remembered you guys were Canadian. That's another
Yeah,
odd
yeah,
tidbit
we're in
I got
BC.
from- Are you? Oh, I'm glad at least one of you know where you are. Otherwise, it'd be
I
blind leading
mean,
blind.
it's
It'd just be awkward.
50-50.
Depends on the day.
That's right.
Oh, a lot of travel.
No, it depends on the state of mind.
Yeah, the state of mind. We're-
yeah.
yeah,
That many
we're-
drinky
I-
poos in. Oh, a lot of drinky poos.
Yeah.
You don't remember
Exactly.
where you
Right, yeah.
are.
Yeah,
That's
sometimes
the bottom of
it's,
the bottle drinky poo.
Exactly. Sometimes
Sometimes
that's where
gets a
you end
little
up,
tough
right?
to.
All right.
Get
Well,
the
we're gonna let you
callers
go
on
there,
Podbean.
Glenn, and
Go have a nap.
wrap up the show.
At least one of you is probably taking a nap. And take care,
Right
guys.
now?
Good hearing you.
Soon, yeah.
Probably
Good
not
to
right
hear
now.
from you,
You might
Glenn.
wait till
Hopefully you
after.
check us out again sometime.
Oh, I don't know how to hang up now.
Yeah.
hang
Let's
up.
see if I can figure it out.
Oh, you can.
It's been so long since we had a caller.
Well, we really appreciate you calling in, Glenn, and
So I muted
we'll
you.
try and figure out where we are next time we're live, and hopefully we'll hear from you again.
Yeah, I don't know how to hang up on you either. This is crazy.
I guess you're just in it with us to the bitter end.
Oh, there we go. All right, we're disconnecting you, man. Take care.
Well, that was fun.
That was fun.
Yeah.
We that's officially the first call that we've had since you have been co-hosting.
I think it went really well. We didn't touch the subject matter, but we had some really good discussions.
We had
so-
some good discussion, and yeah,
and that's what it's all about.
that idea about like warning labels on books is interesting.
Ah,
It's
yeah.
interesting. Yeah. Maybe we'll throw that to some politicians and see what they think of it.
Yeah. We could make it a real hot button issue. Florida, maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so that's it for us, I guess. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with our. I don't know. I don't think it was going to require multiple episodes to cover
We might be
Heartstopper.
able to
I
get through
suspect
it
we'll
all
just do it
all
in
at once.
one.
Okay.
And I guess we can talk then whether we want to do multiple volumes. Maybe break them up over time because I know that like volume 5 isn't even out yet. So
Yeah, not out till November or something.
yeah,
My daughter
so
said.
like maybe we cover one every couple months or something. We'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll depend on how we feel about the first one. If the first one
That's
sucked,
true,
we'll be
yeah,
like,
yeah.
we don't want to.
I mean, since our kids are obsessed with it, it might be good, but
Yeah, hopefully our kids have good taste.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's what I'm banking
Um,
on right now, to be honest.
But yeah, it's also a good excuse to keep up on what our kids are all about, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So until next time, I have been Mr. Todd Sullivan.
And I've been Peter Ammon.
Until next time.
Go read a fucking book.